Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the January 9, 2024, I hear an echo. Okay, that's better. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the January 9th, 2024 Planning Commission regular meeting to order. The Planning Commission is holding hybrid meetings. Members of the public can attend the meeting in person or observe the meeting on Zoom online by visiting www.cityofarcata.org and following the live meetings link at the bottom of the city's homepage or on the city's YouTube channel. If you're attending remotely, please be aware that the Zoom feed provides the closest to real-time stream. If you rely on the other feeds and you wish to make comments, please be aware of the time lag on those feeds. The first item on our agenda is the land acknowledgement. The City of Arcata acknowledges that the lands we are located on are the unceded ancestral lands of the Wiyot tribe. The land that Arcata rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Gudene, meaning over in the woods or among the redwoods. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments removed the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from the land and threatened to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Arcata acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement seeks to aid in dismantling the legacy narratives of settler colonialism. Next is roll call. Staff, will you please call roll?
Commissioner Simmons?
Here.
Commissioner Mayer?
Here.
Commissioner Strickland?
Here.
Commissioner Lehman?
Here.
Vice Chair Tagney?
Here.
And Chair Davies.
Here. We are joined this evening by Community Development Director David Loya and Deputy Director Jennifer Dart.
And I'll note for the record that Commissioner Yodowitz is absent.
Thank you. Next up this evening, we have public comment. During this time, people may make comments about items that are not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on one of our agenda items, you will have an opportunity when we are discussing those items. If you have comments about items that are not listed on our agenda today, please line up now behind the lectern. If you are on Zoom and you wish to make comments on matters that are not on today's agenda, please raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon on the right side of your screen or by pressing *9 on your phone. The clerk will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. With that, I'd like to open public comment. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to comment during early oral communications. Feel free to state the name for your record. Feel free to state your name for the record. May we have the first speaker, please?
Thank you. I'm Fred Wise. Good evening and best wishes for the new year to everyone. At the City Council meeting on January 3rd, Director Loya told the City Council that, quote, "I believe the public process has made its course. We've wound up with a document that, from what I can tell, is the community vision." I asked the commissioners this. There was a community meeting at the D Street Community Center on September 24th last year. It was at 4:30 p.m. First, I asked, how many of you could come to a meeting at 4:30? How many working people could come to a meeting at 4:30? People were there. Do you know what the community's vision was at that meeting? No, because it hasn't been shown to you. There was a community meeting at the Creamery, the Arcata Playhouse, May 16th last year. This was the meeting where the commissioners had requested input from the people, the residents, and business members of the Creamery District to find out what was important to them. This is the meeting where close to half the people at the meeting walked out when they were told what the agenda would be, the meeting, and that they would not be able to discuss what they came there to talk about. Have you seen the results of that meeting? No, you haven't. The articles on these meetings are on arcata1.com. They've had hundreds of views. People are interested in this stuff. On the agenda packet tonight and on the agenda packet at the council meeting last week, it says the commission made recommendations to move several policies from the Gateway Plan to the General Plan. I propose it was not several, it was 86. I propose that if someone said, could I borrow your car for several days, and kept it for 86 days, you would not be happy. These things, in my opinion, mislead the public and lead to a situation where people are not interested. The use of negative polling that was done to, in the process of moving the gateway policies to the general plan, I feel is entirely inappropriate. It was said that the framework was going to be used that night. The framework was not used because, as you know, the framework involves you submitting your comments in advance so we can all see them. The question came up at your last meeting about whether there'd be a form-based code, multiple form-based code, or a single form-based code. Commissioner Lehman brought this up. I'll mention in the general plan, the community benefits program, the community benefits program and the form-based code are always expressed in the singular, 22 times, never plural. That can be changed. The form-based code, I asked when that's going to be done. I've been told it is done. It does not protect the linear park. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Fred.
Good evening. It's been over 2 years now since we introduced the Gateway project, and in 2 years, we still don't.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to check in with the chair as a point of order. It sounds like both the last comment and this comment are matters that are on the agenda. I don't know if you want to allow them.
I thought it was on the general.
Excuse me.
Not the Gateway.
We've already allowed one, so you may wish to, but I just, okay.
Yeah,
wanted to
appreciate
have
the
that.
check-in. Carry on, Gregory.
Okay, in 2 years, we have not seen any visualization mock-ups of what this dream of what the city's going to be looking like in the future. I mean, it's totally unacceptable. I mean, 99% of people in the city are not going to read all of this work that you've been doing. They're going to judge it by what it looks like. And for some reason, in 2 years, you can't generate any visualization on this. I brought this up a year and a half ago from the standpoint, if you really wanted to have the public involved, do that and then put it on a mailer and send it out to every resident in the city so that we know that everyone is fully aware of what's happening. And the decision then was, no, we're not going to do that because we're going to get a lot of people that are going to be pushing back if we did that. So I'm just kind of like wondering what is going on with the city because, you know, just for example, in the New York Times at the end of December here, the paper hired an architect for the city of New York, which is Manhattan, which is Staten Island, which is the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn. This architect then identified all the possible sites in this city, buildings that were one story that could possibly be turned into mid-rises. And you saw animation that just all these dots appeared on this well-defined map. Then the next thing that they did was they looked at flood issues and sea level rise. And then, of course, that popped up, knocked out a number of those sites. And with this calculation still, they're going to generate 500,000 units, 1 million people. And they also went into the third step. They gave the visualization. So they went into these neighborhoods and here's some of these buildings that popped up. You could see what they looked like. They were very considerate of what the buildings were next door so that, you know, nothing was really going over 3-4 stories, brownstone sort of aspect. And you guys are still on the 7th story, which is, I mean, New York City, which is super, super dense and obviously has some kind of standards for their neighborhoods. So I just want to know why, you know, you don't have any visualization of what this dream for the citizens of Arcata needs to look like. It's just a lot of vague language that could be this or that, you know, and it's not very precise. I mean, this is a tiny little city in comparison to what I just brought up. So it should be that you could be able to do this. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Gregory. We have anybody waiting online, David?
Yeah, we do. Go ahead, Jim.
Thanks. And I will be taking advantage of the moment to comment on something that's somewhat related to the subject tonight. It's related to the removal of GA9F solar shading, ensure new developments to minimize solar shading surrounding properties. And that was suggested for the general plan, and it's since been removed off of there in favor of D1E, promote energy efficiency and solar access. Site and building design shall emphasize energy efficiency, solar orientation, consider shading of adjacent structures and balancing the development needs of those solar access. My main concern is that that language has been removed from the gateway, the latest draft, which would date back to July 11th, 2023. And this was something that was a recommendation from the Energy Committee, and the original GA9F is ensure developments minimize solar shading to surrounding properties. And my concern at this point is the gateway draft is a standalone document, and I'm just not sure that anything within the gateway draft now directly addresses solar shading. I'd love to be corrected if I'm wrong, and that maybe there is some still policy in there that addresses it well, or at least, directly, mentioning solar shading. And that's my main concern, and I'll leave it to that. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Jim. Anybody else online, David? Negative?
Yeah, we have no one else online.
Okay, as always, thank you for your comments. We appreciate all of your participation and input. We will now move on to item 3 this evening, our consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the commission and are enacted in one motion. Commissioners or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. The only item on our consent calendar this evening is item A, approve Planning Commission minutes, regular meeting, December 12, 2023. Do any planning commissioners wish to pull the consent item, or anyone else? Judith?
Yeah, I'd like to pull business item A, consider a recommendation to the City Council on the general plan updates. The minutes read, the commission made recommendations on the gateway policies, but deferred the other topics to a later date. The commission understood the work to date would constitute the basis for the environmental impact report. This, on the one hand, underplays what we actually did, or at least what staff thinks we did. And on the other hand, neglects to mention that discussing the rezoning of all of the infill opportunity zones actually addresses issues far beyond the gateway, but in the larger general plan as well. The reason I think that this is important as a distinction is that when staff presented the general plan to the City Council at its January 3rd meeting, there was definitely a sense that we had somehow taken an action forwarding those plans in their current form to the City Council for their approval. That's not what we did. David said, this document is the Planning Commission's recommendation, singular, as of December 12th. We never took an affirmative action indicating a recommendation. We had a series of policy recommendations, and I feel it's important to add that additional detail to avoid a sense that this was a recommendation that was taken in the affirmative to the City Council.
Are your concerns addressed if recommendation is made recommendations?
It is recommendations in the minutes. Some additional detail would help. We would also want to add and discussed rezoning of other infill opportunity zones in the general plan overall, and other relationships between the gateway and the rest of the general plan, because I think that's really what we were doing. And this did not represent a final action on the gateway plan. In fact, we didn't even see the draft that was indicated for December 12th until after that meeting, nor did we ever see the general plan draft that came out on the 22nd as of that time. So I think adding that additional detail would do it, and would not misrepresent what we did.
Okay, I'm going to be honest, I don't 100% track everything that you're taking issue there, but can staff weigh in on the meetings and proposed language change to that, adding further specificity or clarity per Judith's concerns?
Yeah, I mean, we would be happy to add anything that the commission wants to add to these minutes. The minutes reflect the topics that were identified in the staff report. It's a synthesis of the topic that was in the staff report. You had about 3 topics. When we started the conversation, part of my staff report was that this is going to be the basis. Whatever the recommendation is now is going to be the basis for the environmental impact report. Whatever topics you get through, that's going to be your current draft recommendation for that process. You'll have time as we go through the environmental impact report to review, and ultimately you'll make a formal recommendation. You're going to adopt a resolution that has these documents referenced, however they're modified between now and then, and that'll be the time when you make an actual formal recommendation. But we have to go through the environmental review process. In order to go through the environmental review process, you have to have a project description. No, you didn't look at the draft that is, sitting on the deck here that's on our website in its exact format, but it synthesizes all the recommendations that the Planning Commission had made over the last 2 years up until that point. And so those are your recommendations. They were made over the course of time. And that synthesizes the body of work that you've done. But having said that, yes, there's a lot of detail. I mean, this is a one-sentence topic, one sentence that tries to describe what you did over the course of an hour or whatever it was. And we'd be happy to incorporate what I have so far is, and discussed rezone of other infill opportunity zones. And then you got ahead of me, but I'd be happy to track whatever other changes the commission wants to make.
I think I mentioned, and numerous other policy changes related to the general plan. Okay, so that is in the label of the item, but it went far beyond the gateway plan and did not really constitute a recommendation on the general plan, which is not what we actually did that evening, but it is how you portrayed it a couple of weeks later.
Yeah, that's how I portrayed it to the Planning Commission in my staff report on the 12th, and that's how I portrayed it to the City Council at their meeting on the 3rd. But I think I've got the statements that you would like to incorporate. If the Planning Commission would move and adopt, we can add those to the record.
I move to include the statements. I think they're accurate and see no problem with them.
We have a motion. Do we have a second for this?
A second.
Motion and a second. All in favor to amend as recommended?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Having cleared that, does that, that gets us through that consent calendar and gives you what you need to update that? Thank you. We have no public hearings this evening, so we will be moving on to item 6 on this evening's agenda. We have 2 business items this evening. We'll start with business item A, consider a recommendation to the City Council on general plan updates. Tonight, we are receiving the December 12th, 2023 draft of the general plan. I understand the council has received this version already and has directed staff to circulate the EIR based on this version. My understanding is that they have also asked to review a few policy areas before adopting the plan. Staff, do you have anything else to add to this report?
Yeah, just a couple of things, and, this is sort of a redo of the city council staff report that was given on the 3rd. So I'm going to leave a lot out. If you're interested in some of the background, we were doing a little bit of a victory lap on the 3rd. It felt really good to have these documents out. Again, I've got a copy here, and there's a copy in our office if you want to thumb through it, but it's also on the website. And so really the purpose for tonight is for the Planning Commission to receive the fruits of your labor, the benefit of the work that you've done over the last couple of weeks, or years, excuse me. And, again, to kind of identify what the process is moving forward. This document reflects the work that you did in December 12th. It also collates all of the work that you've done over the last couple of years, your recommendations leading up to the July recommendation, and then the work that you've done since then, getting into detailed policies and language and changes that you wanted to see using the framework that you're using. The commission can, continue to look and refine certain policy areas from going forward if you choose to. There is a relationship between, environmental impact and the changes that you might make that have, potential effects on what the process looks like moving forward. If you hone language, change it, doesn't have a change in the effect in the environment, then those are the kinds of recommendations I think the city council would be very happy to hear. If you want to bring in a new body of policy, new programs, new, zoning, that sort of thing that's going to have an effect on the environment, then that's going to mean recirculating the environmental document, time, money, and staff and delay. So, the question was asked before the meeting, can we make changes still to this language? Certainly you can. Again, I would encourage the commission to, consider, similar to what we've done in the past, is there momentum, large momentum to make those changes before you get into lengthy discussions about them, because you already have done quite considerable amount of work. So with that, I just wanted to let you know the list of topics that were of interest moving forward for the city council. So you're alerted to the types of topics that you might be asked by the city council or might be of interest to the city council for the planning commission to consider in the future before we make a final adoption. One, and this was more of a, attempt for the council and the community to better understand how the overlay zone works, or the combining zone that we discussed at our last meeting, as a way to make the policy changes that we put into the general plan effective in the gateway and potentially other areas. And so discussing that overlay zone was one topic. You recall from our study session where we discussed inclusionary zoning, we did not get to an endpoint with that discussion, and so that's continuing topic for their consideration. They wanted to talk about affordable housing and inclusionary zoning. They wanted to discuss the parking standards that are called for at the policy level. In the general plan and in the gateway area plan, there's a little bit of confusion some council members feel in the community, and so they wanted to make that a topic. There was a request to discuss again what's in attachment A, the recommendations you made, and was that the right choice? Should we keep some of the topics in the gateway area, specifically the community benefits program, instead of moving that into the general plan? Other topic that came up was the topic of owner-occupied housing, and so home ownership was something that they wanted to have a little more discussion on. And I think that those are the primary topics that they wanted to weigh in on as we wind through the environmental impact report over the course of the next couple of months, while we're looking to put out the final and have your final hearings starting sometime in May, April or May, for final review. So I wanted to keep it short, leave it for questions and deliberations and public comment.
So just to be clear, these are issues that the city council plans to take up in its own discussions based on the work we've done.
That's correct. They've taken the work that you've done and they're taking it into consideration. It's possible that they may, refer something back down to the Planning Commission and say, hey, give us some more insight on X, Y, or Z. I feel like on all of these topics, you've already had lots of deliberations and that you've made recommendations on each of these. But it may be the case that they want more detail from you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, given the work we've done, really exhaustive discussions over the last couple of years on the Gateway general plan, et cetera, I don't see a need to reopen the general plan for major discussions or revisions at our level now. I'd prefer to take our energy to support the city council, and if there's anything specific in the future that they want us to revisit, that feels like a good way for us to move forward, focus on the items they're interested in and the few staff recommendations that we may not have had sufficient time, such as it is, to consider previously. And David, I just want to check in with you. Is that your understanding of the level of input that the city council is looking for from the planning commission at this point?
At this point, I don't think they've asked for anything specific. And I do anticipate over the course of the next couple of months, they may come to things that they want the commission to look at, but they, at this point, haven't asked for anything specific.
Got it. So I'm just going to assume that they're going to take up their discussions, and as a result of those discussions, they may or may not ask us to weigh in. But at this point, we're just sort of almost ceremoniously receiving the work that we've done over the past number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, in the next meeting or two, we'll have, a list of topics that staff feels like we didn't, get sufficient recommendation on. Certainly in February or maybe early March, we'll have the environmental impact report here for a public hearing so people can provide oral comment. That document will be released for public comment on January 31st. Is our target date right now, and it'll be out for circulation through the 18th of March, giving us our slightly more than 45 days required circulation period. And during that time frame, we'll hold a hearing, as we typically do on EIRs, so that folks can come speak to the Planning Commission about their concerns.
Got it. Do any other planning commissioners have questions or concerns before we open to public comment? Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so just point of clarity. The council's not requesting any discussion or further information or direction from the commission on any of those 4 or 5 topics of concern. Is that correct?
Yeah, not at this time.
Okay. I will just state for the record that I am interested in the topic of home ownership that came up from them, and I just don't feel fully fleshed out on this as a group here. I know where we've batted around. I just don't quite know where we stand on it. So if we have a chance to revisit that and solidify a little harder if we can, I'd be interested in that topic.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Okay, not seeing any other questions or comments, we will move to public comment on this item. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Feel free to state your name for the record. May we have this first speaker, please? Welcome back, Gregory.
Gregory Daggett. I was at the last council meeting, so I'll bring up a few things they were concerned about. One, they got a lot of letters from residents. They've heard about their neighborhoods potentially getting some of the same impacts as the Gateway. So I think Stacy mentioned that one. So there's a lot of concern about what's going to happen in the particular neighborhoods. So my question to you is that seems like it's very vague on where it's going to be. Where's the Sharpie, and to like zero in on those streets and those particular areas that you think whatever height building should go? Because I think a few people brought that up in the audience, and the mayor said, don't worry about it, we're not going to do that, you know. So where's the precision on exactly where this is going to happen? I'm open to other neighborhoods. I'm not like saying that you have to, but I want to see some exact where it's going to be with the pen, not some vague language that everyone's guessing, oh, am I going to get a 7-story house next to me? So that's one issue. The other issue was parking. There seems to be, you know, the talking points that we all are not going to need cars in the future, and all our buildings are not going to supply any parking. I'll have to say that I came from Miami and have been there like a month, and it doesn't matter young or old or what their politics are. If you told them you weren't going to have assigned parking in your parking garage and you had to park a couple blocks away, you know, no one would be in favor of that. And I have a feeling that's how it is here, but we seem to think that it's not a problem. And I would say, like, take a look at what's right now it's happening. We had Cal Poly that took over the building here on the plaza that used to be really helped out our businesses. That lot is not being utilized anymore because they put up signs saying permit only and paying. So you're affecting parking already without even any buildings. And then take a look at what happened over at the co-op with, you know, some work over there. We lost 20 parking spots in the co-op because we redesigned that. We only have one entrance coming in, and it's going to be one ways in the future on either side of it. What happened to our bike lanes? You know, we spent like $1 million for, you know, workshop and engineering. I don't see a bike lane there, and I like to see you guys put a bike lane, spray paint it there by the post office and by the campground, and I like to see some of you back a car out there and then have the bikes going by and see how that works out, because I know there's people that are not quite walking and taking a look at this. Take a look at the Creamery building where the Playhouse too. I could have sworn that there's supposed to be a sidewalk there. We have all those vehicles that back out there, could have an accident anytime. It's a very dense area, and you know, look what happens when all those parking spots disappear and people have to park on the streets there.
Thanks for those comments, Gregory. Welcome back, Fred.
Thank you. I'm Fred Wise. At the January 3rd City Council meeting, the director used the phrase, he said that the policies were, you made your decisions by a variety of methods and there was a majority consensus. I propose that there is no such thing in the world as majority consensus. I will send you an article about that. The director told the council that the commission looked at each and every policy in the process of determining which policies would be put into the general plan. I propose that you do not look at each and every policy. The city's website states that the vision statement is the commission's recommendation. I propose that it's not your recommendation, that you hadn't seen it at the time of your last meeting. You worked on it, we honed things down, but what is there in the current iteration is not complete. It does not include everything that took place at that joint study session meeting. This can all be fixed, but this is a regular situation where the director says that you recommended something or that you reviewed something when you did not. In terms of the policies, I've identified 21 policies out of the 149 that are said by staff to be the same as, similar to, or in the housing element, when in my opinion, they're not the same. They're not similar, or they're not in the housing element. These can be looked at. As an example, just one of many, 9F, in the gateway policy, which you developed, it says solar shading, ensure new development minimizes solar shading to surrounding properties. This is supposed to be the same as, that's a quote, D1E, which says consider shading of adjacent properties, adjacent structures. That is not the same thing. At some point, the commission, I'm asking the commission to look at the implementation measures on Sunset, Bayview, Northtown, which say that they're to be looked at as becoming mixed use. What does that mean and what does that imply? Hopefully we have the next few months to go through this. As I told the council, and Director Loya knows this, I'm in favor of moving this forward to get the EIR underway. You have months to hone things down. At this point, there's lots of errors in the general plan. They can be corrected, but these larger things, I think, need to be looked at. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments, Fred. Anybody online waiting to weigh in on this evening's discussion?
Yeah. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hello, Commissioners. I sent in a letter a bit ago regarding a couple of implementation measure changes that I would like you to consider. I am making these suggestions based on discussion, particularly council discussion in recent months. Language should be added to the end of the Growth Management Implementation Measure GM-3, stating that the sphere of influence boundary shall be reduced to eliminate prime agricultural parcels to the west and north of Arcata city limits. This matter has been discussed several times by both the Planning Commission and City Council, and yet the specific reduction is not included in GM-3, even though there are other areas identified there. Also, Land Use Element Implementation Measure LU-9 should be eliminated from the draft general plan. The City Council has heard broad support from the community in favor of keeping the character and density of existing Arcata neighborhoods intact. The Council has echoed this sentiment outside of their consideration of the 4 already identified infill opportunity zones, which makes this important to eliminate at this time. Lastly, I am concerned by language the Commission added to Open Space Policy OS-1E in the general plan at the last meeting. This policy, which pits our open space lands against one another for their presumed value to the community at any given moment in time, is a radical departure from the community's commitment to protect our open space lands. I am researching impacts this policy could have on the future integrity of these lands, and I will provide you with more information in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Anybody else waiting to comment online?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Appreciate, as always, everyone's comments. We all appreciate the input and participation. Now we are moving on to business item B, which is to consider adopting the 2023 Planning Commission Annual Report and authorizing the chair to present the report to the City Council. Does anyone have anything to add to the annual report, or is there a motion to adopt the report and appoint the chair to present it? Peter?
Thanks. Excuse me. I'd like to support the idea of trainings. I think it's really important. And I would like to add training in California coastal law and regulations and climate change to the list. And I'll just say, I do not understand what engagement training is.
Okay, engagement.
Engagement training.
I'll second that, Peter. I found some of the training that the local government. What was that group that did training for us? Jen?
The Boost, was it Boost training?
It
you're
was
talking
the,
about?
I think it was, yeah, it was the ILG Planning Commissioner training.
right. Extremely useful, and I know a number of us were able to attend that. It was at the old D Street Community Center, and I think it's a great investment for the city council to make, given the fact that they're, putting a lot of stock in the recommendations that we make. I really just want to see them make that investment in training for a planning commission. I think it's really worthwhile. Does anybody else have anything they wanted to? Judith?
Yeah, I make this recommendation about the training every year. Most years, budget never appears, but Peter, I heartily agree with you about the coastal training, especially since we are going to be dealing with the local coastal program. And there are a bunch of commissioners who haven't been involved in that process yet to date. So it's super timely and super important, and great training resources are available, probably at fairly minimal cost to the city. So yes, yes, yes. I'd also like to recommend that, if possible, the format of the Planning Commission's report to the council, the annual report, actually return to something more similar than what we've used, to what we've used in prior years, in which we first list our goals of the previous year and accomplishments, and then list our goals for the coming year, 2024, as a way of tracking, where we've come from, what we've done, and what we have kind of missed doing. Using that form, it allows us to track the Planning Commission's activities from year to year, and allows anyone looking at what we've been doing and what staff needs are as well, to track that. And so I'd really appreciate if the report that you will present to the City Council actually returns to the format that we've used in the past, rather than this much more interesting to read, I'll confess, format that we're using here, a format that is snappy but doesn't really allow us to track what we need to track in this process.
Perhaps the best of both worlds, some kind of something that incorporates both. Dan?
Yeah, on the topic of trainings, it's under recommendations, last paragraph, it suggests that the commission could benefit from Brown Act training. I feel like we get a lot of that, and I would yield that to the, I know that's elemental in the just being on commission. I feel like we get dosed with that, and we can always go back and read the do's and don'ts. So I sure hope we don't schedule a specific training and only end up with that. I love the other ideas of the trainings.
Does everyone on the commission, is everyone aligned with a formal request for the kind of trainings that we've been discussing, so that we can make sure the city council knows that we're unified in that request?
I guess I just have would it be a public training like at this time, or would we meet at some other time? And I just don't know what it would look like.
The training that I'm referencing that we attended was like a 2-day session over at the old community center. And there was actually planning commissioners, planning professionals from around Northern California there. The Institute of Local Government put it on. I personally found it really useful, great discussions. I took a lot of information out of that I keep in mind at every single planning commission. So I think some of the trainings are perhaps Zoom trainings. I think there's a variety. I just think the main thing is that the city council knows that we're in favor of them supporting a budget for making sure planning commissioners have as much training as we can bring to bear as we weigh in kind of all these important issues before us. So I think we're all aligned there. Peter?
I would just put in a plug for in-person trainings rather than Zoom trainings.
Amen.
I've seen enough Zoom in the last few years.
Copy that. I would also like to just take the temperature of the commission on Judith's recommendation that the format be more of a look back, look forward, where we were headed, where we got. Is that, as I prepare to make this annual report to the city council, is that something that the rest of the commission agrees would be useful? Okay.
Can I just interject about the format?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in preparing the, this annual report draft for your review, I pulled up the last annual report that I did last year, as I always do, and started changing the dates, and then I noticed at the top there was a statement that this was pursuant to, resolution such and such. And so I figured, okay, well, I've never in my entire career gone back and looked at resolution such and such. I've always just taken the last annual report and updated it based on the exact same format. And when I went and looked at resolution such and such, it actually identifies a whole range of other topics that you're supposed to be reporting to the city council on. And so that's why this is a little bit more expansive. And what I've done in this format is I've incorporated both, progress from last year and goals for this year. And so, for example, in the training, I mentioned that the planning commissioner training provided by the EILG under bullet number 7 there is the first sentence where you went to that training in October 2022. And that also in November of 22, commissioners were offered the opportunity and acknowledged that it was a short time to turnaround, but in November you were able to go to the Environmental Quality Act, California Environmental Quality Act training put on by the Association of Environmental Planners. That's a typo in here. It says American Planning Association. That's actually the Association of Environmental Planner. So, I did try and compress that information into one section, but, I can certainly split that out into separate sections. Since I don't have the information in front of you, we could do one of two things. You can either tell me what information you want to put in there, or I could pull forward from your last annual report the goals for this current year and just drop them in, but you won't have looked at them.
Go ahead, Judith.
Hi, the material, the way you presented it, it is indeed snappier than the previous format. So I'm wondering if you could keep this, but then add the more familiar format to make it easier to
Absolutely. I'm just
follow.
suggesting that if you want me to add them, the only way I can think to do that, if you were to take action on it tonight, is to literally just pick out of last annual report and drop that section in after the goals here that identify the items that you had as goals for this last year.
That's what you've always done, and it would be kind of nice, even if you've done more this year, to kind of have that format as well, so that we have a consistent way of tracking it over time.
Either way, Scott has the opportunity to go off script.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll basically, there's two options. I've put both pieces of information, future goal and current progress, in each of these sections. So I could split that out into two sections if you want, or I can just pick up the policies or the goals from last year and drop them in. So I'm looking for direction.
I think we all understand what we're trying to do here. I don't think it's super complicated. Is it possible that you and I just work to get the best way to relay this?
That's a third option. We can
together,
do that too.
Outside of the meeting, so that it flows in a way that makes sense and accomplishes what the commission is after per Judith's recommendation.
That
We'll schedule
works,
some
yeah.
time and do that.
Yep.
Okay. We will now open public comment. Again, each speaker will have 3 minutes. Please approach the lectern or raise your Zoom hand.
Good evening. I also appreciate your interest in training. I think training is great. I had sent a letter to the commission on Saturday mentioning a few things, the main one being what Commissioner Mayer brought up, that I think the way the previous commission reports were in two sections. One had the progress on the commission's goals from last year. Second section is the goals for the current year, is much more clear. So I appreciate that you're changing that. I also suggest adding a list of projects that the Planning Commission saw in 2023. I have the projects here. There's not that many of them. And that also has a good indication of what you've been up to. Cal Poly Bookstore, Tuttle Residence, Harder Remodel, Fountain Mixed Use Development on 11th Street, and the Morehouse Carport. That was it. On Arcata1.com, you may have seen it, I don't know. I have the annual reports from 2007 to 2022. I have the videos for the last 5 years, and 6 or 8 historical vignettes where I just saw a paragraph or a section that interested me from 2013 to 2022. It's great historical context. You can see what has done. You can see the kind of the history of the city over this last time. And those are also constructed in goals and what was accomplished. But as I say, my little vignettes, I just picked out a few sentences that interested me. That's it. And at the council meeting, there's a question of whether there'll be public comment during this, after this report. Last year there was not. Every other previous year, going back 6 or 8 years, there was. Or at least it was called for. No one spoke at those other times. But last year, it was, that they specifically said there's no public comment. I think that this is the mayor's decision, but if the chair can put in a word, I would like to see public comment after the report. I think that's good for the community. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Fred.
I also support, especially the Coastal Commission, your knowledge and becoming more aware of the laws, state of California, and that's going to be one. I'll have to say that I haven't been here in a long, long time, and I'll tell you why. I'll say that, it was total nonsense those months and months that you weren't going to allow the public to have any input during your sessions other than the first 2 minutes. I mean, I don't think anybody from the outside looking in would look very favorable in that situation. So, I mean, that was a very unfortunate situation. I don't think you need a class for that one. That was just common sense. And you can see, our audience today, this process later on. I had no idea how many people would be showing up tonight. I'm just kind of shocked. Nobody other than Fred and myself are here. The other thing that I have to say that, sure, we've had sessions, but how much of you are you really intaking from the public that's really affected your decision-making? It seems like you're pretty set in your ways, from my perspective anyway. And I'd point out too, other than Judith, that I don't think anybody here is an architect or has a master's in urban design. I mean, I'd be surprised if anybody's even taking classes in that subject matter. So, and essentially, you're a novice too up there. I mean, we appreciate that you're volunteering and doing your best to, have a vision for the city, but I wouldn't quite have I'd be much more open to what people have to say on the changes that need to be put into the city, and then not come off as like, sort of what happened on August 23rd when we had somebody that had an idea to get help. I have some architects that volunteered, and he didn't seem to be really interested in that idea at all, which I don't know if we would have had any architects that would have volunteered, but it would have been a nice option if they had jumped in there, because they could have been quite an asset in helping you out in this and not slowing down the process. I think that was your reason. So I think the annual report is a year in reflection of how you can do better in the situation. And I'm not totally confident even, I suppose I've been a little harsh on you guys at times, but we have a council, and I don't think they're very knowledgeable in this subject at all. They're just learning, and the fact that 3 of them are going to make the decision on this just doesn't quite work out. I'd rather have somebody who's a professional with a master's degree and years in experience making a decision as important as this.
I appreciate your comments, Gregory, and I'll just say I disagree with your take. We have never had a meeting where we don't have public comment. All of us take public comment seriously. There's diversity of opinion in the community, so the fact that we don't follow or agree with one segment of the community's opinion doesn't mean we're not listening to public opinion. Additionally, we all have email addresses where we can receive email at any length and regularly do from a variety of community members. So I appreciate you, even if, as you said, you felt like you were a little harsh on us. Public matters, public opinion matters. I appreciate the input, and we'll continue to make a commitment to having public comment. Anybody online wishing to weigh in on this?
I don't see any online.
Okay. Given that, we'll move on to correspondence and communications. Do we have any correspondence from Planning Commission members?
I have a question on the last item.
Go ahead, Abby.
Weren't we supposed to appoint a member to present it, or are we just going to designate the chair?
I think that's a good question. I think we were agreeing to, my understanding was we were agreeing to direct me to make the presentation and to incorporate the viewpoint on that Judith brought to the process of that report. And David and I will work to make that happen. Is there something more specific you need?
No, I think that's sufficient, but I think it would be good to take an action on that. Take a formal action.
Request a motion?
Yep.
Okay.
I move that Scott, our chair, present the annual report to the city council.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Abby, thank you for that point of order. Appreciate it. So tidied, is there any correspondence from Planning Commission members?
And before you move on, I'm sorry, there was one email that I did hand out, or that I'd like to hand out, that I emailed you today. Late in the day, it was in reference to a public comment that came in. And it addressed some of the comments in particular that came in that, it's not a big deal at all by any stretch of the imagination, but I just wanted to clear up some confusion that the public comment may have made. And so we'll have, those are in the binder, public binder. You did receive an email from me today, and they'll be available in paper copy.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Judith.
I don't know if this is correspondence and communication. It's more communication and question. In preparing for our last meeting and this meeting, I did go over both the draft general plan and the gateway plan as posted on the 22nd. And there were a bunch of questions, comments, stuff that I picked out of it, and I'm wondering when we would have an appropriate moment to bring those things forward, or if those things are things that I should just stick in a list and send to you, David, and have them go out. Some of it is little details and inconsistencies. Some of it's more important stuff, and so based on the schedule that we've heard you explain, there would be no opportunity for us to bring that forward and actually talk those things through, aside from the council's direction and discussion of the EIR. So how should we deal with those things? I'm sure I'm not the only person who's actually read through those plans.
Yeah, we're a little outside the agenda item, so I'll try and keep it brief, but I think as Commissioner Tagney raised, he'd like to talk a little bit more about homeownership. There may be, specific topics that different commissioners want to bring forward. I think it would be great for you to, set aside some time. We can go over those, and we'll bring them in one of the coming agendas. There are still some cleanups that need to be done.
Okay. Any correspondence from staff?
Nope, we don't have anything.
Okay, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.